So we're still speaking about the spirit of folly, which, as the Talmud points out, and as the Tanya states here, is the reason for which a person sins. Ein adam choteh ela im ken nichnas bo ruach shtut, as it says in the Talmud, that the spirit of folly enters a person that causes him to sin or to deviate, as we said. We also said that the word for folly is almost the same word as the word for deviating, because that's what it does. It deviates us from our alignment with God. Now, we also said that the spirit of folly comes with all sorts of thoughts. One of them, which is the latest idea, is that the spirit of folly tells a person that there's no difference between a major one or, that there is a difference between a major sin and a smaller sin. Look, you can just do this little tiny sin. It's nothing. Nothing's going to happen to you. Which is, by the way, we go to the original sin or deviation, shouldn't call it sins, but the original deviation, which is a deviation of the tree of knowledge, when God told Adam and Eve, do not eat from the tree of knowledge. That's exactly how the snake functioned to convince Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge. If you recall, he said, hey, nothing's going to happen to you. Don't worry. It's just a small little thing. You can just taste it. It's not a big deal. And that's how the spirit of folly functions. I'm hearing my echo. Hope you're not hearing my echo. I don't mind hearing my echo, I hope. Okay, but in any case, that's how it functions. That was the latest idea. And let's just continue. Bottom of page 30.
Okay, I'll read. I'll go ahead and read.
Yes, please, Andrea. Thank you.
Okay. It is different, however, with someone that is entrusted to the heart, namely that evil should actually be despised in the heart or abhorred with absolute hatred, and not even quite so absolutely. This cannot be attained truly and sincerely.
Right. Continue here with the commentary. Go for it. The advice
The,
here.
ad- the advice here is not effective with desires of the heart, over which only Siddiqim have dominion. As will be explained, the Bayani um, oh,
Yeah.
The Bayani can attain varying levels. He can rise to excellence and even give an even righteousness insofar as he acts not merely to fulfill his own obligations, but exceeds by far normal expectations in both quality and quantity. Someone like this who dedicates his life to Torah and commandments may, in the midst of his efforts, come to regard a particular transgression with disgust and its commission as utterly unthinkable. Nonetheless, he is unable to achieve a genuine revulsion towards evil. Whatever feeling of loathing he has is a consequence partly of his education and partly of his state of mind, but it does not originate from the depths of his sensibilities.
Right. And this is one of the great differences between the Beinoni, which is really the goal, which should be the goal of every human being. And that's why this book was written. It's called the Book of Beinoni, which is a state, as we've mentioned many times now, in which we have eradicated evil from our actions, from our deed, from our speech, but from our thought, not eradicated, but at least pushed it off completely. That it still permeates the thought, but we're able to push it off with both of our hands completely. But tzaddik, on the other hand, is someone who has completely eradicated the evil on all of these three levels. Again, action, speech, and thought. And the main difference here, as is described right here in chapter 14, is that the tzaddik really is infatuated with God. He's so much in love with God that for him doing evil is unthinkable. The Beinoni, on the other hand, doesn't have that level of intensity of love towards God all the time. And therefore, for him, doing evil can still be a thought. It's not a thought that's going to materialize itself in any shape or form, but it can still be a thought. He still has maybe some type of attraction towards evil. Tzaddik, on the other hand, is so madly in love with God, he says to himself, well, doing evil will separate me from God, which was the big idea here on page 30, that sin, right, is a separation between a person and God. And therefore, why should one want to be separated from God, even for a split second? The tzaddik, for him, that's the most despicable thought one tzaddik can think of. A Beinoni, he doesn't have that level of attachment with God, and therefore, again, says to himself, okay, maybe yes, maybe no, but then he pushes it off immediately. So Benoni in action is exactly the same as a tzaddik. In thought, he still has room to improve because he's not at a level of love with God that the tzaddik is. I'll add just one thing, and that just to emphasize this point that, you know, um, love is a complex world. Love, I think, is an overused word too. But many say that love is not an emotion, it's an action, which is very much true because in order to love, you have to act. You can't just feel it in your heart. That's why in Hebrew, the word for love, ahava, is the word giving within it, hav. Because in order to love, you have to give and give and give to the person that you love. So love is an action and not just an emotion. But here, the Tanya, I think, redefines love altogether. It's not an emotion, certainly an action. But the Tanya says also love is a state of being. It's a state of being. When I'm madly in love with someone, it shows, it reflects in me and outside of me. It's like when I'm walking with my beloved all the time. When I'm sleeping with my beloved. When I'm eating. Every second of the day, I'm with my beloved all the time. I'm inseparable with my beloved. That's what true love is. Now, the tzaddik has that type of love. And because he's so in love with God, and wherever he goes, God goes. And whatever he thinks, God thinks. And whenever he eats, God eats. Then for him to welcome any thought of evil is just repulsive. Why? It's going against my beloved, and I am my beloved. It's my state of being. For the Beinoni, it's different. Hasn't achieved that type of love yet. So it's harder. Can everyone achieve the tzaddik level of love? Probably not, as the Tanya clearly states. But we can certainly be in love with God in the sense that love, of course, is an action, that we can always act godly, but also in the sense that it's not completely a state of being, but at least we strive for it to be a state of being. That's the redefinition of love here by the Tanya, which is an important idea. It's something that we should strive to. Can we achieve it? Maybe not, but we can at least strive to be in that state of love, to have that definition of love fulfilled in us too. Anyway, we can continue, but please, I welcome comments, disagreements, ideas, whatever it is. You know, to put it in a very biblical way, every day in the Shema, we have the commandment to love God. We say, "V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha." You shall love God with all your heart, right? B'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, with all your soul, and then b'chol me'odecha. Now, the commentaries struggle with what it means. What does it mean, me'odecha? How do you struggle with all your me'od? Some say it means with all your might. Every fiber of your being, you should love God, which is in many ways the state of the tzaddik, that with every ounce, every fiber of his being, he loves God. Rashi understands the limitations of man who's not a tzaddik, which is most of us, who can be and should be a Beinoni. So what does he say? You should love God with all your money. That's me'odecha. To reach that state of being, me'odecha, the real translation of me'odecha, with every fiber of your being, maybe that only belongs to tzaddikim. So therefore, he says, okay, at least do it in your actions, in your money. Do it with where you spend your efforts, which is translated into money, and then you give that money to God. Then that you can achieve. But it's also hinted in Rashi's commentary on Me'odecha, on that commandment to love God, because not everyone can love God in such a way. On the other hand, again, we have to strive to love God so that every step of our journey in life is walked with God himself, and is infused with the question of what would God want me to think, not just do right now. Anyhow. Okay, let's continue again, unless there's any comments, questions, disagreements, so on. Otherwise, let's go. Speaking of this love,
Except through great and intense love of God, the kind of ecstatic love that divine bliss which is akin to the world to come. Hatred of evil never emerges by itself. It is always accompanied by an ecstatic love of God, the love of delights. It is impossible for them not to be connected. It follows then that when someone imagines his actual hatred of evil without also having the matching feeling of loving God with a love of delights, that hatred cannot be counted as real. It is only the natural recoil that one experiences on encountering anything he regards as unpleasant. Only when one directs himself entirely toward holiness and it becomes his permanent roommate, when he is longing for good so deeply ingrained that it fills his soul without effort and needs no reinforcement, then whatever opposes this is despicable and loathsome in his eyes. In the absence of such conditions, it would be unrealistic to expect true hatred of evil.
Right. So I would dare expand this thought and say that every mode that we operate there's a mode uh, that stands opposite it that we despise. It's true culturally. For example, I know that in China they eat all sorts of creatures. They would eat dogs, cats. For the Western civilized man, that's something that's abhorrent. Now, if you ask the Chinese, no, it's something that's a delicacy. How could that be? That's because, again, I operate in my mode. In every mode that I operate, there's a mode that stands opposite it. To the mode that I'm in, that other mode seems despicable. Now, this is true for the mode of love. If I'm madly in love with um, with God, then anything that stands opposite God, that mode in which people operate, where there is zero God, that's a mode that I despise. The deeper I am in my mode, the more I hate the opposite mode. It's just the natural way that God created this world. And that's why King David says, Ohavei Hashem sinura. If you love God, you hate bad. Because again, you are so deeply in love with God, deeply engrossed in that mode, that the opposite mode that stands against it is something that's abhorrent in your eyes. It's true for health. We've used this example in the past. If I am a health guru, then anyone that operates in an opposite mode, whereas eats pizza and burgers all day long, something that I despise, something that my body will never be able to absorb because it's so opposite everything I stand. So in every mode that I operate, we have to understand, as King Solomon says himself, that this against this God made. It's the literal translation, which means there's one mode here, there's an opposite mode here. The mode of loving God is so captivating to a person. That love is so engulfing that it also creates this hatred towards the mode that stands opposite it, which is evil. The more I am immersed in this mode, the more I despise evil. Again, it's true with everything else in life. And this really describes best the tzaddik. The tzaddik is completely infatuated with God, as we said. And therefore, he can't stand evil. There's no attraction to evil. One who is less engrossed in this mode is one who is more open to the opposite mode. And therefore, he can have evil thoughts. The zeh leumat zeh is not as distinct and therefore as separate in his mind. And therefore, again, the emotions of hatred, which is a strong emotion, but that's the emotion that King David describes again. Hashem sinura, those who love God hate bad, is not as intense. So that's the idea. This is what we're speaking about. A love of delights. What's a love of delights? It's a love that I'm so in love with my beloved, I can't stand the other side. There's an interesting discussion in the Mishnah about. It's a fascinating discussion. I don't know if we've mentioned it, but about when a person is allowed to divorce his spouse. At one point, is it justified to divorce? And there are multiple opinions. One opinion says, if your spouse burnt your cooking, you're expecting a good cholent on Shabbat, and it's all burnt. Okay. Rabbi Akiva's opinion is a drastic opinion if you think about it. He says, "Afilu matzah isha na'a mimena." that if you found a more beautiful spouse, that's grounds for divorce. Now, it's quite stunning because, how dare wouldn't we expect that the grounds for divorce should be like something that's really, isn't it a common thought that, wow, okay, fine, there's a beautiful woman here. It doesn't mean that she has to be my spouse, but I can acknowledge a beautiful woman. Is Rabbi Akiva saying that really that's ground for divorce? But I think that Rabbi Akiva is teaching us what it means to be in love, as the Tanya year is teaching us what it means to be in love. What Rabbi Akiva is teaching us, Rabbi Akiva, by the way, whose marriage was really a model of love with Rachel. Many stories about him. By the way, the song Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, that we all know and love, Jerusalem of Gold, comes from Rabbi Akiva, believe it or not. Not Naomi Shemer. Naomi Shemer wrote those beautiful words, but the words of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, really she took from Rabbi Akiva. Jerusalem of Gold. Why? Because it is the inscription that Rabbi Akiva had made for a necklace, a golden necklace that he bought for his wife, Rachel. He wrote on it, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, and that's where those words come from. But anyway, his marriage was really exemplary. And he says that no, if a person, what does this mean? That if a person has even the thought that, okay, I can compare my wife to another wife, and therefore that, to another woman, and therefore that other woman is more beautiful than my wife, if I'm already in that comparing game, then I'm not in love. And if I'm not in love, it's grounds for divorce. Because one should be so madly in love with his wife, with his spouse, that there is no thought even of saying, oh, okay, I'm going to compare. No, my wife is held here. Why should I compare diamonds to pebbles? But if you are already starting the comparing game, then you got a problem. Then your love is compromised. And this is the type of love here that the Tanya is speaking about. Really, the Rabbi Akiva type of love, of spousal love, is the type of love that the tzaddik has for God. I'm so madly in love with God that I can even entertain the thought of comparing someone else to God or even wanting anything else but God. Everything else to me is naught. It's nothing.
Rabbi,
yes.
I like your thoughts on love, but
it's not mine. Okay, yes.
But about hate, I have a problem with hate because hate is a word that I really hate. And I say that because if you're taught to hate the other or to hate what you think is wrong, this is part of the problem that we have in our society, and including especially in Israel, where you have such tensions between people who think they're right and they hate the other.
Right.
So hate is not something that the love idea I like, but the hate idea I'm a little bit more cautious.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you're mentioning it, and I think you said it beautifully because we have to differentiate, as King David does in that verse where he says, "Those who love God hate bad," between bad and what we may call bad people. He doesn't say "Sinu anashim ra'im," hate bad people. He says hate bad, hate evil, hate the evil in others. Don't hate ever hate others. Don't personalize your evil. Don't hate individual. Hate evil. The notion of evil that may sometimes inhabit parts of others, you should hate. That's, it reminds me of the famous story of Rabbi Meir and his wife, Bruria. Rabbi Meir had people who would, it's a famous story in the Talmud where Rabbi Meir would be bullied by his neighbors. He had neighbors who were hooligans, and they would bully him all the time. And one day his wife, Bruria, catches him praying that they should die. And Bruria was taken aback, and she says to her husband, Rabbi Meir, doesn't say Yitamu chataim in haaretz, that sins should be eradicated, not sinners. Lo chotim, sinners. Doesn't say that sinners should be eradicated from this world. It says that sins should be eradicated from this world. So you should pray that their sins should be eradicated, not them themselves. Rabbi Meir acknowledged they had made a mistake, and he prayed that their sins should be eradicated, and they did teshuvah, and they stopped bullying him, and others. But it's true. We have to differentiate between evil and what we may say are evil people. Of course, there are evil people. Terrorists are evil people. They have to be eradicated. Let's be very clear about that, because evil has completely taken control of them. But I'm speaking about the common evil around us. That evil is not is more abstract. It's not human being evil. And we have to pray that that evil should be eradicated. And that's what this hatred really refers to. It's a very strong word, and we shouldn't use it loosely. By the way, as we shouldn't use love too loosely too. But it's a different story. But hatred, we should certainly be very careful about using that word. And that's true. I tell my children all the time, don't tell me you hate this ice cream, you hate this kale, this broccoli. Don't use that word for broccoli, because it's a very, very dangerous word. But on the other hand, when it is used, it has to be used surgically for the concept of evil. God forbid, not for people. And it comes again, not from hatred. The only hatred that is legitimate is hatred that comes from love. Hatred that comes from hatred is illegitimate. If I'm a person that's negative and hates, then I got issues. Then I should go to therapy or whatever. Then I should learn Tanya. But if my hatred comes because I'm just infatuated with God, I'm so in love with God, and therefore I hate the concept of evil, again, not individuals, then I'm fulfilling that which King David states, Ohavei Hashem sinura. One who loves God hates bad. We have to be careful with it. And again, we can individualize it, like he said.